and like, just to share with everybody, like, that moment, I mean, was legitimately emotional. Like, I remember looking at Jacob, and he had tears in his eyes. We were emotional. Lindsay was emotional. Like, it's like, I describe it as the culmination of 6 months of work, and then you have something tangible in your hand that belongs to the person that you're looking for.
Hey everybody, how you doing? Welcome back to the Another Nobody podcast with me, your favorite nobody, Travis Myers. Today we're going to be talking about the Karen Shepers case. Now, Karen Shepers went missing, completely disappeared off the face of the earth back in April of 1983. But this year, due to the hard work of the Elgin Police Department's cold case unit, they closed this case. And what's really interesting about it is that they did it with the help of you. When I say you, the people who listened to their very own true crime podcast. That's right, they have their own true crime podcast. This is nothing I've ever heard of before, and as far as I know, it's the first one ever. The Elgin Police Department started their own true crime podcast, and their first season was all about the Karen Shepers case. And with the help of the public, they were able to close this case. So it's a really interesting story. Please give it a listen. And that's enough for me. Let's get with these detectives who solved the case. All right, here I am, sitting with the fellas from the Somebody Knows Something podcast, which I know I just gave you a brief introduction, but something that I'm so excited about, you guys, that you're actually doing cold cases in real time. All right, it's a
Yeah,
fascinating. It's, to me, to my knowledge, this has never been done before. Has it? You guys heard of something like this before?
I don't think so. When we started looking at it, it was myself and Matt, and we kind of looked at the option of doing something as we were working on it. And we said, well, we found some other agencies that would do one or two little episodes here or there about an old case, like asking for a tip, but we couldn't find anything that was really similar to what we were doing. So we felt like maybe it'd be something unique that people would like.
I think it's phenomenal. Now, please, before we get started, each of you introduce yourselves so we know who the listeners who know who we're talking to.
Yeah, I'm Sergeant Matt Vartanian. I work for the Elgin Police Department. I've been with Elgin since 2008. My background is I spent roughly 12 years in our gang unit, so investigating gang motivated crimes, firearm offenses. Did some cell phone mapping over the years. Worked with Andrew on a number of cases when he was in the Major Investigations Division, and I also have a background as an evidence technician as well.
Excuse me, I'm a little under the weather. My name's Detective Andrew Houghton. I've been a detective in Elgin since 2013. I've been a police officer here in Illinois since 2007. And most of my background, kind of like Matt said, I was a patrol officer for about 6, 7 years. I was an evidence technician as well. And then I became a detective back in 2013. I spent about 10 years working general assignment cases. So we would get anything from a burglary up to a homicide. But my specialty
That's how
ended
we
up,
do at the NYPD. Yeah, you work a squad, and the squad
yeah,
handles everything. Right.
yep.
Yeah.
So like, we sort of specialized to some degree. So my specialty sort of became child exploitation, crimes against children. So most of my cases were child pornography, child exploitation, hands-on offenses against children, and also sex assaults. So that's what I handled mostly for about 10 years, in addition to homicides and other stuff. And then in 2024, our chief created this cold case unit, and I joined over as the first detective with that, along with Matt.
Hey guys, sorry.
Go ahead. No, please go ahead.
Detective Christopher Hall. I've been with the department just over 9 years here in Elgin. Primarily served on the patrol division, on night shift and afternoon shift. I'm also a former member of the Elgin SWAT Team Emergency Services Detail. Became a detective last May of 2024, and primarily, just like Andrew said, you start off, you're doing Resbergs, stolen autos, any general case that comes through. That's kind of like my wheelhouse. And then once Matt got promoted, there was an opening in the cold case, and I put my name in the hat. And I was fortunate enough and privileged enough to jump over with Andrew, and have been here ever since.
And this is the first time now that in your department in Elgin, which again for a lot of our listeners is right outside of Chicago, correct?
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
Elgin's
correct.
about 40 miles west of Chicago, something like that. We have about just under 120,000 people. We're the sixth largest city in the state, so we're a larger suburban, agency.
Cool. Yeah, just again, so people geographically know exactly what we're talking about. And this is your first ever cold case unit within the department, right?
Yeah, that's correct. So the unit was started, like Andrew said, May of 2024. It was our chief, Anna Lally's idea to create the unit. As she had come up, through the ranks in the department, it had always been kind of an idea of hers to want to create that unit. And once the idea came around, to move forward with it, we jumped in. Andrew and I were the two that got involved with it, and we were fortunate to join the unit in May of last year. And shortly after that, she came to us and said, I want you guys to do a podcast. And we honestly were a little apprehensive to the idea because, we're cops, we're not podcasters, right? We had no experience with that whatsoever. But truly, we did take a step back and, we were objective in our thinking. And we said, well, you know what? This could actually be a very powerful tool for us to be able to use to help get exposure to these cold cases that we have that are sitting, in our case file, and get the popularity of them back out there. I hate to say that word, but just get people exposed to them, right? Because they're just sitting on a shelf, right? Like people get forgotten. In every case, there's a victim in these cases, and we don't want that to just be some lost person that nobody cares about anymore. That's how you get it out there. So we're all true crime junkies, and we listen to true crime podcasts all the time, and we're like, yeah, the power of this vehicle to get this information out there is tremendous, and using it in the context of wanting to spread the word about our cases out there we're like, yeah, this is a great idea. We just had no experience with it.
Yeah, well, I tell you, that's something that really impressed me with our conversation when we met. I met you guys at the True Crime Podcasters Convention in Danvers, Massachusetts, a few weeks ago, and I was both impressed that your chief, Anna Lally, started a cold case unit because most departments don't have them. In fact, the NYPD, the largest police department in the world, did not have a cold case unit until 1996, which sounds like forever ago to you young guys, but really it's still fairly new,
Yeah.
And even then, it started with 50 members, and now because of manpower shortages, which plague every department across the country now, I think there's less than a dozen guys working these cold cases. And what a lot of people don't get, not only, yes, are you fighting for some kind of, justice for the victim, but quite often with these cases, they may be 10, 20, 30, 40 years old. But that's not the only victim. The families are victimized too. Yeah. The parents, the loved ones, the husband, the wife, the children, et cetera, all these people are victims of these crimes. And because evidence is, there's never a detective that doesn't want to catch the bad guy. That's simply not the case. But sometimes the evidence, leads to nothing, and it happens again and again and again. And I know from where I came from in the Bronx, quite often people don't realize that, well, why would a case ever go cold? Well, it goes cold because you have so many other things to do. And it sounds absolutely horrific, but it's a fact that you cannot put 100% of your efforts into one case because tomorrow there's going to be a missing child. The next day there's going to be a terrible sexual assault. The next day after that there's going to be another homicide. And the newer ones, it's like that television show we all know, The First 48.
Yeah.
That's where the meat and potatoes are, And once something becomes cold, once the months and the years go by, chances of finding something is becomes slimmer and slimmer. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Travis. Historically, in our department, it was always an ad hoc approach where you would have current detectives that are working active cases and they're on call. Whatever comes across their desk or on the radio at that day, they would get a cold case. I say sprinkled across them, right? It's like, hey, you work this old homicide or you work this missing person case, and from our perspective and experience, it's like, you're not doing those cases justice because you're getting pulled in different directions, whether it's working, a call that just pops off, or you have to go testify in a homicide trial from 3 or 4 years ago. Like there has been no dedicated unit at all. So once the idea came out that we're going to throw the resources at it, right? So in our experience, it's personnel, it's personal spaces, right? You have to have a private space for a unit like that, and then it's money too, right? I mean, with the way DNA has changed over the years, this testing for these old cases is expensive. So you have to have somebody that's willing to understand that philosophy and like the big picture and knowing exactly like what needs to be done the right way. You can't just say, hey, I'm going to give this to my current detectives that are working their active cases. That's not doing anything justice, or it's not helping. So I think we're very thankful to be able to work in a department where they recognize those things and they say, let's not screw around with this. If we're going to do it, let's do it the right way. And that's kind of how we jumped last year.
Yeah, I think having a dedicated individuals is definitely the right way to do it.
Yeah, I think it's the only way to do it. Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, when I came upstairs in 2013, they gave me a 1981 cold case homicide. A guy's named Alfonso Munoz. He was shot in front of a business at an argument at a bar, basically. And I worked on that case off and on for the last 10 years. I got a little bit of movement here and there on it. The offender, they have a warrant for him. He fled to Mexico, but I would have on a normal basis 20 to 30 active cases on my desk in addition to that case. And it's really difficult when you're like, all right, I'm trying to find arrest records from this specific area in Mexico from the 80s, because we know the guy went back there and we're trying to figure out where was his family, is he still alive, that kind of stuff. And tracking that down through ICE, Border Patrol is what existed then. It wasn't even Homeland Security. So you're like going back through these like different agencies that didn't exist or have changed over. And it takes so much time to do that.
Yes.
And you can't do that when you're like, I'm going to do this for 20 minutes today and then not look at it for 6 months. Like you sort of fall behind and you're always playing catch up. So having us do it full time is really the only way to do it.
Well, then to go back to the when these cases went cold, what a lot of people don't realize, at that time, there was no DNA. There were no computers. No. I myself never touched a computer once when I was in the police department. I used a typewriter,
Yeah.
And if I wanted to do something, it was via telephone or fax, if you were lucky enough to have a fax that was working. And literally, I'd get in the car, or if there was a car available that day, sometimes I'd have to take the bus down to Borough Command within the Bronx, and or all the way down to 1PP, One Police Plaza in Manhattan. And people don't realize something that would literally take you 15 seconds to send an email now would take me 4 hours. And I still might not get an answer.
You'll talk to guys that work in the suburbs out here. Like I worked at a different department before I came to Elgin. And in the 70s even and into the 80s, they didn't have radios. Like they would go, the dispatcher there was a light on top of the water tower that would turn on, which meant that they had a call, and they would go to a phone booth and call in and say, where's my call? And then they would go to that address. So like the technology over the last 40 to 50 years is literally like putting a man on the moon. It's such a different like mindset.
What do you fellas call a patrol car? A uniform patrol car. What do you call the car itself?
A squad, yeah, or squad car.
Squad car. See, we still call them RMPs, which is a radio manned patrol car, because when the first radios came out, they were only in the car. You didn't have one on your hip. So it was an RMP, a radio manned patrol car. And that's still a vernacular. Well, I don't know if it's used today, but that's what we used in my time. It was still an RMP. And then, of course, you heard the stories. If you've ever seen the old movies of, cops back in the day, they had no radios either. They would beat their nightsticks on the curb. Dot, 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 dot. So hopefully another cop 5 or 10 blocks away would hear that and come running. Because you were on your own, brother. That was it,
Yep.
So, but anyway, let's stop with the nostalgic stuff and get on with what you guys are doing today, okay? And let me give credit, too. I want to give credit to your chief, Anna Lally, not only for putting you guys together, but for coming up with this podcast idea. Because, well, you yourself said that you were a little 50-50 on it when she proposed it to you. But I could see how, in many departments, a young detective coming up with this idea would have been shot down by your boss. Oh, you're out of your mind. What are you thinking? And so, credit to her. Again, so let's get back here. We're going to talk about your first case/season, all right? Which was a missing person of, what was her name? Karen Shepers, correct?
Yep.
Who went missing, April of 1983?
Yeah, specifically April 16th of 1983. So Karen Shepers, she was 23 years old at the time of her disappearance. She was a young working professional. On all accounts, that what we've discovered through our investigative means with the case she was put together. I mean, she was a working professional. She had her car paid off. She had her own apartment. I mean, she had it together. She had friends, family. She had everybody that we spoke to throughout the case that really spoke highly of her. She went out on the night, it's actually the night of April 15th of 1983 in a neighboring town called Carpentersville, Illinois. She went to a bar called PM for a work event. So that spilled over into the morning hours of April 16th of 1983. Several people reported that everyone was hanging out, having a good time. And then after that night, Karen and her vehicle, which was a canary yellow 1980 Toyota Celica, were never seen or heard from again. And that was when we took the case last year. That was what was it, Andrew? Roughly November of last year is when we inherited.
October, November.
It had been almost 42 years since her disappearance. So, to kind of bring our listeners in, on why we chose her case, we went, forward with the podcast, and, we had to pick a case. And for us here in Elgin, so just so people understand, we have 4 different categories for cold cases. So we have homicides, we have sex assaults, we have missing person cases, and then we have unidentified human remains. For us, in order for it to be a cold case, it has to sit unsolved for a period of 3 years. Once it hits that 3-year mark, then we inherit that case onto our case file that we have. So when we started the unit, we had to triage everything. We had to figure out exactly what did we have over the years. We had to get all of our case files together and just do an inventory of what our cases were. So we ended up with 41 open homicides, 26 open sex assaults. At the time, we had 6 missing person cases, including Karen's, and then we had no unidentified human remains cases. So, for just 2 guys, that's a tremendous amount of work that we had to kind of sift through and figure out, hey, what are we doing here? How do we even start with whatever we had? So our department created a policy for our cold case unit. We have, I would call it a solvability matrix, or a case adoption matrix, where we run it through a matrix to figure out what is the solvability factor based on a number of items to be able to figure out how we can even move forward with the case. But with all that being said, we had the podcast, and we said there's several homicides that we have that have legitimate, good solvability, but that's stuff we didn't want to put on a podcast because it could jeopardize the investigative integrity of a case. So we looked at Karen's case and we said, she's been gone for almost 42 years. We have no idea what happened to her. We don't know if she did something to herself, if she was murdered, or something in between. We have no crime scene. We have no body. We have no car. We said, there's a lot of content here that we could put out there. I mean, we felt very comfortable saying there's nothing that we could hold back on this case.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of if we find her, we find her car, we find new information, we can start siloing things down and releasing less information. But until we found her, we had nothing. You don't have a crime scene, you have no forensics. The only physical evidence in this case was basically in 2009, 2010, our agency went and got familial DNA, got her put into some databases. So it was just items from the family. That was the only physical evidence, even in our lockup, was just this DNA evidence of family members. And we have photographs and stuff, but we had a huge case file. It was probably 4 different, the accordion like binders or folders. There's probably 4 or 5 of those for this case, because when she went missing, Elgin police looked at it in 1983. State police looked at it in 1988. Elgin police looked at it again in 2010. And then we picked it up in 2024. So there was we were kind of the 4th iteration of investigating this case. I think that as we went through it and structured the season, we said, well, how do we even structure a podcast season? What are we even doing?
Right.
And so we said, well, let's just sit down. We read the whole case file. And like you said before, Travis, we picked up this case in probably October of 2024. We didn't start releasing podcast episodes until the end of January. So it was all of October, November, December, January was all prep work before we even started recording anything. And it was just getting through digesting the case file and talking to people. We did interviews with people. We talked to old detectives that worked the case, stuff like that. And Matt and I kind of came up with 6 kind of working theories of, okay, here's what we think could have happened to her. And let's just structure our podcast based on these 6 theories, and we'll walk through each one as we investigate the case. And that's how we're going to do it.
And that was something that what I really liked about what you guys. Well, let's back this up just a little bit. I want to make sure I remember what I want to say there about what I liked. But you did get some professional help. One of your local radio station stepped in to help you produce this, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, it's in downtown Elgin, so it's very close to our police department. It's WRMN 1410. So we've had a good relationship with them over the years. Our chief does a radio show with them every Friday. We do various appearances on the radio show. So they were the ones that actually, got this up and moving for us. Like what we did some, I guess you'd call them pre-production meetings where we said, this is what we want to do. How in the world do we even move forward with this, right? We're just cops. We're not podcasters, and they had a good plan in place to figure out how can we put content out. There's that entertainment value, obviously, right? We want people to be drawn into it, and we had what we thought was a unique idea in the true crime world because we are actively investigating a case and we were going to put content out while we're doing that, right? And we had spoke earlier, we're all true crime. Yeah.
That's what's so brilliant about what you guys are doing, you know, is that, from I don't know what we want to call them, but the armchair detectives out there can get involved and can help you out. And I'm sure it did. You got plenty of phone calls and plenty of leads on your leads. But again, what I really liked about when I listened to it is the way you laid it out. The way it was laid out. I don't know how much that was you guys individually or with the producers from the radio station, but you go step by step on how you want to attack this. All right, and then you allow us to join you as you did, and you did. You stuck to your 6 theories, and you broke them down one by one and stepped through it. And really, it was a very good listen. All right, it intrigued me, and again, when I listened, it was already all after the fact, but I could see how a person could get attached to this, especially a local person who would know.
Sure.
Want to help you along. Now, again. Do you have any idea just how many man hours you put into this case? I know that's a tough question.
It's got to be hundreds and hundreds of hours. We just getting through the case file. I would say the case file itself is probably Matt, 2,000 or 3,000 pages worth of paperwork. We had a whole table and we were piling stuff up and dividing it up into piles of like, oh, I got more medical reports or I got more this reports or whatever, and just like trying to organize it. And that was like, a week of just doing that and then reading everything and then going through everything and then traveling to different places to interview people. And then actually recording the episodes was probably the least amount of work we did, because I would write the episode up with Matt and then we would record it and then we would edit and then the radio station would edit and we'd be done. But it was basically, even when we resolved the case, that was probably 3 days of us being at work for 18 hours a day, back to back to back, working on the case, and we weren't recording anything for the podcast. We were just doing the investigation.
Now, if you could, for our listeners again too, give us your 6. I'm sorry, you wanted to say something, Matt? I don't want to step on you. Go ahead.
No. It's mentioned not to mention all of the, I would say, off-duty text messages that we had back and forth. Right? It became like you're just kind of talking about the case every day. You'd go home from work. And, you're shooting each other text messages being like, hey, I forgot about this or that, right? And, our poor wives with probably all they had to endure with everything, too, have just been like, who are you texting? Oh, you're texting Andrew. Matt, like just going back and forth about it. Well, but it's fresh in your mind, right, Travis? And it's like you don't want that thought or anything. You want to keep going, and you want to keep on moving with, the ideas that you had.
Oh, absolutely. No, I understand it 100%. If you can now, please... again, for our listeners, lay out the 6 theories you had and then how you attack them one by one.
Sure. I'll just lay them out real quick and then we can kind of go through them if you want. So the first one was that Karen just took off voluntarily or harmed herself in some way. So that was our first kind of working theory. Our second thought was she's at the bar and something happens at the bar. So the bar is essentially a crime scene where she's abducted or she leaves with someone or something like that. Our third option was that she leaves the bar and something happens between the bar and either her house or her boyfriend's house, because she may have been going to her boyfriend's after the bar, also in Elgin. Our fourth was that she made it home and something happened at her house, and there was a lot of characters around her house that had some issues that we were looking at. Our fifth option was that she went to the boyfriend's house and something happened there, a homicide or some sort of accidental death there. And then our sixth option was sort of a variation of the third one, that she's going home, but that instead of something suspicious happening on her drive home, she crashes or has some sort of event that her vehicle goes into a body of water and disappears because the vehicle was gone. So those were our 6 theories that we wanted to work through each one of those. And the big thing we wanted to do with that was, sometimes in law enforcement, even people we would talk to were like, well, I think the boyfriend killed her, or I think someone abducted her at the bar. And that was like the real focus where they put a lot of their eggs in that basket. And we said, we don't want to do that. We want to make sure that we give every single option equal possibility, because we just don't know. And we didn't want to be in a position where we're like, well, I think she crashed in the river, so we're not going to look at anything else. We're only going to look at that. Right. So that was kind of our wholesale view of what the case was going to be. I think that right now our tip line has probably, not all of them are Karen's cases, but I think since we started it in January or February, we have like 65 different either emails or calls or tips that have come in on either Karen's case or other cases we've been asked to get involved with, local cases that we have. So it's been really helpful. We've gotten a lot of tips, even on some cases that we're talking about in season 2. When we were working Karen's case, we had people that knew Karen that were also, because Elgin was kind of a small town then, like 50, 60,000 people. We had a woman who was like, I worked with Karen, but I also went to high school with Lori Bolger, who was murdered in our town. And she was there with her the day that her homicide happened. So people reached out to us because of the podcast and gave us information on 1 or 2 or multiple cases because they're from the area. Sure. And no one had asked them about it, so now they were offering up new information that we didn't have before.
I'm sorry, you want to say something, Matt?
Yeah, I think kind of touching base on what about just being open-minded with everything. I think we could trouble with confirmation bias, right? In law enforcement, where you have a theory and you kind of have the evidence around that theory, right?
Happens all the time.
Yeah, it gets you into a trick bag. And that was one thing, when we took these cases over, we had obviously a fresh set of eyes on these cases, and we just wanted to be completely open-minded and objective in the way that we were approaching Karen's case, because we really had no idea what had happened. I think it's important to note too, the first thing that we did before we really got into her case is we talked to her family, because we didn't want to open up old wounds that they had, or bring up trauma that they've had in the past, because the Shepers family had several, I would say, not great experiences with law enforcement over the years, and we were very aware of that, as making sure that they were on board with wanting to move forward. Because if they didn't want us to touch this case again, and investigate it, by no means we didn't want to be that department where we just say, forget the family, we're going to do what we want to do. That's not who we are as individuals. That's not who we are, as a department. We wanted to make sure that we had the family on board with it. So when we knew that we were going to take Karen's case on, we made a call to Karen's brother, and he almost hung up the phone on Andrew, like legitimately, because he's like, here we go, another round of law enforcement. What are we going to do now? Thankfully, he didn't, and we were able to move forward. And we developed an amazing relationship with the Shepers family over the case, just because we kept them in the loop on everything, because there's no reason not to. There really isn't. There's, I get it, like law enforcement wants to keep information close to the chest and everything like that, but I think that can actually harm you a lot of times. And I get it. There's a place for it. There's a time, but the family that's been wanting answers for 42 years, why not include them on what you're doing when you can do that? And, throughout the last 6 months when we were working this case, we've developed some amazing relationships with the Shepers family, like to the point where we could call them friends. They are just true salt of the earth people. Karen's mom is 90, and for that woman to be able to, ask us how we're doing in the middle of an investigation about her daughter, that just tells you the caliber of human being that you're dealing with. That was, I think, one of the big takeaways for all of us with that.
Well, again, and to go back to the point which you mentioned earlier, well, you kind of not so much mentioned it, but what you built around Karen is what a good, decent person she was. She did not have any drug history. She had
Right.
no, problems with alcohol. Or, she had a good relationship with her boyfriend, good relationship with her family. She had, money in the bank. She owned her car outright, if I'm not mistaken. You
Yeah.
know,
She, yeah.
and she
She
was
had life
not
insurance. Like,
not what we would consider a high risk person.
no.
Right.
A person that was at risk for this sort of thing.
Yeah.
Although there were many interesting things that you guys found out along the way, as far as through all your different leads. Um, one of which I don't want to get off track here at all, but it's in my head now. One of which was did the person that lived in her apartment before her had a very checkered history.
Yes. Yeah. We're talking about him in our second season, actually. We're interviewing the family. Yeah. The family of a case for that. We're interviewing them, I think, on Friday. Um, but this guy, Thomas Erlacher, lived in Karen's apartment until the fall of 1978. And then he moved out. Well, in 1976, he was the sole, basically the only suspect in the abduction and murder of a 14-year-old girl.
Yes.
He wrote a letter where he's basically admitted that he buried her somewhere, and the family ended up suing him and winning a civil lawsuit against him, but he was never criminally charged in her case. And then he kind of recanted some of his statements. But he picked up this 14-year-old girl. He was with her. He was the last person seen with her. She is probably buried somewhere in our county. We don't know where. She's still missing from 1976. And when police figured that out and we started looking at it, we're like, well, he lived in her apartment. The landlord said he never turned his key in. He had a very checkered drug history, sex assault history. We were like, well, where was he? He was in Colorado, but did he have family here? Did he come back? Could he be involved in our case? Because you look at it and you think, well, Karen could have made it home and something could have happened at her house. This guy could have been visiting the guy downstairs who he was friends with. There was some drug history in the house itself. There was some pornography history within the house itself. And you go, okay, you have a 23-year-old pretty girl. Maybe she shows up late at night and something happens. So we had looked at that pretty extensively and ended up not using it all in the first season because we went in a totally different direction. But when you say man hours, like we're going to talk about that in our second season when Chris and I talk about that case. Matt and I spent like several weeks going down that rabbit hole
Sure.
for nothing, right? But you still have to kind of check that off that box, right?
Well, and it certainly is a red flag when you have a known sexual predator living in the apartment before you did.
Yeah.
Yep.
It was
We interviewed the guy downstairs too, and he had a criminal history with some, exposures and things like that. So there was a history with that. So there was just a lot of things around her in terms of people, because even the people in this apartment that were friends with Thomas Erlacher and some of these guys had reached out to the girl's name was Barbara Gluckert, who disappeared in 1976. They may have had knowledge about what he did, or he may have told them things about what he did, things like that. So we're like, we have kind of a cast of characters around her house that are, like you said, a little bit of a red flag where you go, well, we probably need to talk to these people and consider this as an option.
Sure, absolutely. And then a thing that I guess I guess it did surprise me. I should say surprise because it was that time, that era, if you will. But just how many active serial killers were in your area at that time, which I'm sure surprised you guys too.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah. I mean, we had Brian Dugan, who we interviewed, killed several girls. There was a guy named Bruce Lindahl, who North Aurora, Illinois, solved the case from 1979 last year. He killed multiple girls in our area and one man in our area. There was a group called the Chicago Ripper Crew. We're going to talk about them in our second season because they may have some links to one of our other cases from 79. But they were convicted of killing 6 different women and one man. One of the guys admitted to or alluded that he killed up to 25 different people.
Wasn't there even a connection to Gacy, a nephew?
Yeah, and then in Karen's case, one of the bartenders that worked at the barback that worked at the bar where she was at was John Wayne Gacy's nephew. And we had found a new witness as we were going through the case who had her car moved, who had someone enter her car, leave these letters in her car, was stalking her at the bar in the months leading up to Karen disappearing. So it was just all these crazy things.
I'd like to ask you for a little bit more detail, both on Dugan and this car moving guy whose name escapes me at the moment, if you don't mind, because I know our listeners. I hate to say I enjoyed it, but when I was listening, it intrigued me. How's that part? But first, we'll take a real quick break. All right, so we can we can hear from our sponsors, and we're going to come right back to you guys because this is a very, very interesting thing that you're doing. All right, so give us 1 minute, everybody. We'll be right back. This is a 2024 American Eagle gold coin, which I bought along with several others last year. I'm very happy to report that its value has gone up over 40% in the first year. See, I was encouraged to buy some gold by a financial advisor friend who suggested I be more diversified with my investments. She said gold and silver was a very safe place to park some money, as well as a good hedge against inflation. So I took her advice, and all I can say is I wish I had bought more, as it's been so very, very good to us so far. Now, I purchased these gold coins from the good people over at stackingboise.com, who could not have been nicer, more knowledgeable, or more helpful. Now, I'm certainly no financial expert, but I will say from experience, if you're looking to make an investment, buy yourself some gold. And some real gold that you could hold in your hand, just like this coin you see here. And if you do, then do like I did and get with the good folks over at stackingboise.com. I'm telling you, they're good people, they took good care of me, and they'll take good care of you. Again, that's stackingboise.com. And hey, tell them Travis sent you. You are. Hey, how you doing? It's me again, another nobody, Travis Myers. And today we're going to talk whiskey. I know most of you think of me as an all-American patriotic type guy, and you are right. But when it comes to whiskey and drinking whiskey, which I do, I always go for the Irish stuff. And my choice when it comes to the Irish stuff is Powers Irish Whiskey. Established back in 1791, it's a triple distilled, oak-aged whiskey. Powers is simply magic. It also happens to be the #1 selling whiskey in Ireland, which has got to say something, because if it's good enough for the Irish, it's good enough for you. So the next time you raise a glass, fill it with Powers, and think of me, another nobody, Travis Myers. Hey there, true crime fans. Let me introduce you today to the Cold Case Initiative. The Cold Case Initiative is a foundation that donates money to smaller police agencies all over the country. It does this in order to offset the costs of scientific, forensic, and DNA testing with the hope of solving cold case homicides and other horrific violent crimes that otherwise would remain unsolved. Please, if you have it in your heart and a little money to spare, go to www.coldcaseinitiative.org. Again, that's www.coldcaseinitiative.org, and lend a hand where it truly is needed. Be a part of solving a cold case. Every little bit helps. Know that 100% of the donations that go to the Cold Case Initiative go to agencies that are desperately in need of the help. So please, if you can, do the right thing and make a donation. Thanks, and all the best, my friends. All right, everybody. We are back, all right, with these wonderful investigators over here from the Somebody Knows Something podcast out of Elgin, Illinois. So, where we left off, we just started talking about, the serial killers that were running around at the time, the characters that lived in Karen's building, but there was one in particular that you mentioned that I remember you went into detail because you actually interviewed him in prison. His last name was Dugan, right?
Yeah, Brian Dugan.
Please, tell us about that.
So Brian Dugan was convicted of several murders in the 1980s here in the greater Chicago area. Basically, it sort of works in reverse. He abducted and murdered a 7-year-old girl named Melissa Ackerman. And that was a couple years after Karen. I think it was 1985. And he was convicted on that case, and then he ended up telling police like, "Hey, I was involved in these other cases," and DNA linked him back to some earlier cases. So his first case was a girl named Janine Nicarico in Naperville, Illinois, which is another suburb. She was 10 years old. She was home alone because she was sick. Her mom was working right down the street and came home and had lunch with her and was kind of, letting her stay home sick. And he showed up at the house, knocked on the door, and saw that she was alone. So he kicked the door in and abducted her, raped her, and then murdered her and dumped her in a field. Matt and I initially were like, okay, well, two of these cases are little kids. It doesn't really fit Karen's style of case. But in the case file, we had gotten some tips saying, hey, you should look at this guy because his second murder was a woman named Donna Schnorr in 1984. Donna was driving alone. She was
28, correct?
27, yeah, 27-year-old girl. She was a nurse. She was driving alone at night, and Dugan basically ran her off the roadway, got out of his car, approached her, punched her through the window, dragged her out of the car, abducted her, and drove her to a forest preserve with a strip mine and raped her and drowned her in the strip mine and left her body there.
Awful.
Some people saw him leaving, and he had potentially had some paint transfer on his car, possibly. So he got rid of his car. So he said, well, now we're talking about a guy that sees a girl driving alone at night, runs her off the roadway, gets rid of his own car, which is sort of similar to Karen's car disappearing, kills her, dumps her in a body of water. She's found very quickly because these fishermen come and they basically see him leaving. But we felt like that fact pattern was at least close enough to Karen's case, so we want to take a look at that. And so we did drive down.
It fits very, very closely to what may
Yeah.
or may not have happened to Karen.
Yep.
Yeah, so we drove down and interviewed him. He was at the Pontiac Correctional Facility in Illinois here. He's got life in prison for his cases from the 80s.
Mm-hmm. Did he have an alibi, or was it just once you talked to him, there was nothing worth pursuing?
Well, I think it's important to note that we attempted to interview him, but he did not want to speak with us. So our time with him was short. We made, as Andrew said, we made the trip down there to interview him about our case, and we got him in a room, and he asked us where we were from, and he said he had nothing that he wanted to talk about, so that everybody knew about his cases. There was nothing else outstanding, if you will. But we did not get any formal interview with him or anything like that. So our time was short.
We put out a lot of information about his cases and kind of used that episode to say, hey, if you have any information about him, where he was working, what he was doing, we knew where he worked at the time, we knew where he lived at the time. There's also some other cold cases in our area that people believe he could be involved with. So we wanted to just kind of at least put his information out there and say, hey, this is an option we're looking at. Obviously, if we had found Karen and there was something nefarious when we had found her, he would have been someone that would have popped back onto our list. Like, I think we end the episode kind of saying, like, we can't say if he's involved in this case, but we're not going to say he's not either. Like, we're just going to kind of leave it at that and kind of continue moving, but we have to keep him in our periphery and make sure that we don't just check him off the list, right? You have to kind of keep an open mind.
Well, and you kind of landed in the same, question mark unknown boat there with the creepy car guy who was, I'll let you tell the story, obviously. You're going to know more than me. But the creepy car guy that worked at the same bar where she was last seen, I should say.
You want to take that one, Matt?
Yeah, so through our investigation, we discovered that there was an individual that worked at the bar. He was a sort of, appropriate way to say it would be an off-the-books employee that assisted. He had worked at other restaurants that were in the area from the bar owner. And we found a young woman that worked there at the time that had received some very creepy notes that were on her vehicle. And I'll leave the details to the listeners to go to that podcast episode specifically because there's some rather inappropriate things that were discussed with her. But long story short, she received some very creepy letters while she's there to include her vehicle actually being moved, like physically moved in the parking lot while she's working. And she had a good idea of who she think was involved with that. And it just so happened that she had a brother that had just returned from military service that had a conversation with an individual that they had a good hunch was involved with it. And then once that conversation from the older brother that was kind of landed to this individual, the letters stopped. But they were very, very creepy in nature. there's allegations that this individual was related to John Wayne Gacy as well. So that's just
Well, this is
another.
something that he claims, correct?
Yeah, that, and we kind of heard that through the investigation that there were some other people that had heard that as well. That this individual was maybe trying to sell some items inside the bar to try to raise some funds for John Wayne Gacy when he was in prison. So very interesting tie. I mean, like Andrew was saying earlier, there's you know you don't really know where cases go, right? Like there's a lot of interesting things that come up with these cases, and the fact that there's been several notorious serial killers in the Chicagoland area over the years. There was some very interesting ties in this case that came up with that. Whether it's direct or indirect, but like we said, those are still things that we have to look at. We have to do our due diligence, so we can't just assume things in these cases, right? Because we really don't have any idea. And the whole theory with our podcast is there are people out there that know something about each one of these cases, right? It's whether or not we can actually get people to want to talk about it, that they feel that they're in a place in their life that they can. We attended a recent International Homicide Investigators Association down in Dallas earlier. And we had always thought that a lot of these cases will get solved through technology, and we actually discovered, based on other groups that we worked with or investigators, that it's actually a change in a relationship status how a lot of these cases get solved. You have over the years, maybe an ex-girlfriend or an ex-wife or somebody, that is no longer in a relationship with an individual. And then they come forward and they say, hey, I remember, Billy talking about this case, and this is what he told me, right? Or somebody goes to prison and they say, you know what, I got information about Jack. Jack told me this, 15 years ago, and I want to bring this forward because maybe they use it as leverage to help themselves out with a case like that, and that's the interesting part is there's so much stuff out there that nobody knows about, but somebody knows something. And that's, I mean, not to sound cliche, but that's obviously the name of the podcast, because we do truly believe that there's somebody out there that knows something about each of these cases.
Always, and that's why what you guys are doing, I think, with this podcast thing is so very very interesting, because you are reaching out to the public at large to help you out,
Yeah.
And what people don't realize too within investigations, how something that you don't think is important at all can crack something wide open.
Yep.
You as again part of the public, may know something or remember something that again happened years ago, or like you say, now you're divorced, you broke up, you left the neighborhood, you moved to a different state, and you're no longer afraid of repercussions, and it comes back to you. Yeah, man, maybe I should have said something back then.
Yeah. I think people have kids, people grow up and have their own kids, people have their own daughters, things like that. And they go, man,
Yep.
if that was my kid, I know this thing that happened. And now I'm not 17 or 19 anymore. I'm 40 with my own kids. And that hits them differently when they start realizing my kid's around the same age as this person that I know somebody killed, or my, my daughter or my son reminds me of the age I was when I saw this homicide happen. And they come forward and say, hey, I want to tell you guys what happened to so-and-so in 1995,
Right. So with these, we talked about Dugan a little bit, the creepy car guy, who we didn't mention at all too. There was something with a stuffed animal, right? He was, not only was he moving this girl's car around, he was like, taking stuffed animals out of her car and uh, dismembering them or something like that.
She had stuffed animals in her car that were like beavers because she had big teeth, and her mom, and her joke was always, oh, you're like a little beaver, because she had kind of bigger front teeth. And so this girl had some stuffed animals in her car, and she would come out and find them strangled with like seatbelts or, damaged in some way.
Yeah.
And actually, when we interviewed her, she was an employee that worked at the bar, but she had left a month or two before Karen went to the bar. So the owner of the bar told police back in '83 that, hey, I had an employee. She had someone follow her home from work, had these other complaints. And they said, okay. And they tried to talk to her, and they never did. So we tracked her down 41 years later and called her and talked to her. And she actually found one of the letters that was left in her car because she was in her storage unit getting ready to move. So sometimes you just get lucky with like that weird coincidence too of like,
Sure.
oh, I'm moving. I'm actually in my storage unit. Let me go back through my box of junk from the 80s. And she calls us back and says, hey, I have one of these letters. I still have it in this box.
Well,
And so you're like, oh, okay, that's crazy, right?
there was another young woman too, who I don't believe was this one. I might be wrong, But your case was almost over by the time she came back and connected with you guys, right? Did she not move
Yes.
away? She was a girlfriend of hers or something like that for
Yeah,
almost 2 years. Yeah.
a coworker that was living in Ohio reached out to us and actually saw Karen leave the bar that night. And she was also not interviewed initially because when they made a list of the people that came to this like work function, this woman was in a different division at the company, but had still come because she was friends with some of these people. So they interviewed a whole bunch of people that were there. There were other employees that came that were not on that list. And so when we started doing the podcast, and then when we ultimately found Karen, we started getting other people calling us back in saying, "Hey, I just never talked to the police because I assumed like I didn't really have any new information other than anybody else had, but it sounds like I do." And they gave us this new information that we never had. So that was kind of the power of having this media out there that people were starting to kind of connect
Well,
those
I was
dots
going to say,
back.
again, it goes back to the podcast actually doing some good and getting the word
Yep.
out there. Because here
Yes.
this person came from another state because now you're the new celebrity talk of the town, right? Doing this podcast, it turned out to be
Something
a
like
really
that.
good thing. But in the end, and I hope I didn't skip over anything. Your investigation went in a different direction as far as foul play, did it not?
Yes, it did. We when we took this case over and we started to investigate it, we always wanted to do some type of bodies of water searches. We looked at our case file and we never really could confirm if any bodies of water were actually searched during this investigation in the almost 42 years of it. So, in our town, we have a river called the Fox River that cuts through our town, that runs, right through it. So, when we knew um, we knew that we wanted to do bodies of water searches. That was really important for us. So we knew where Karen was that night. We had a confirmed location where she was, and we knew where her house was. And in between those 2 points, there were several bodies of water, to include the Fox River. So at some point, we wanted to make sure that we were being thorough in our investigation, and we were going to search as many bodies of water as we were capable of doing. But once again, we weren't experts in that field whatsoever. So we had a retired police officer by the name of Mike Goff that reached out to us and said, "Hey, you guys know that there's these groups out there. They're self-funded, sonar search and recovery groups that do bodies of water searches for families of lost loved ones, and they work with law enforcement." He got us in touch with a group called Chaos Divers. They're
Yes.
located out of central Illinois. And we did a discovery call with them and filled them in on our case. And they were very, very busy. They had just come back from a
I'd like
trip.
to stop you right there just for one
Yeah.
second. I'd like to stop you there just for 1 second, Matt, because Chaos Divers, who we're going to talk about in a second, were absolutely phenomenal in this story.
Yeah.
All right. But what I don't want people to, again, gloss over is how much work you guys put into now that you've decided to jump, because you kind of jumped over a what is the word I want to use? A couple of theories to get to the, possible accidental theory again, right?
Yeah,
And
so like the body of water was basically sort of for two reasons. One, did she accidentally crash? Or two, did someone conceal her car with her body in a body of water, like a Brian Dugan or some person from the bar or something like that? So we knew we wanted to search all these bodies of water for either theory, basically. And it jumped up as we were doing the investigation because when Chaos Divers came online, it was like, hey, here's the week that we can come up. And we said, sure, like we're not going to wait. So we jumbled everything we were doing and kind of did a whole bunch of pre work quickly to do that instead.
And that's really
But
what I wanted to make a point of is how much, again, back to the man hour thing, how many hours you had to put into that. One of the things that was interesting is you had spoken about all the different bodies of water because there was the river, a couple of different lakes, a couple of
yeah,
ponds, and you guys had to go out and look at each one of these and decide, geez, we're only going to have these guys for a day or two. Where are we going to look? And one of the things that I found fascinating was you went back and you looked at all the weather for that day, all right, even down to the phases of the moon, which
yeah,
people will think, why are they even looking at this? Well, because it's part of an investigation. You want to put the pieces together as best as possible. And I was like, I'm sitting here smiling to myself. Good job, guys. You checked off every box that you could think of, you know?
yeah,
And I just wanted to bring that point back before we get to the Chaos Divers, who were phenomenal, and we're going to talk about them now. But again, give the credit back to you guys for doing the old gumshoe detective stuff where you checked everything you could possibly think of. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, you wanted to look at like lighting conditions, so Faces of the Moon seems kind of crazy, but you want to know how dark would it have been when she was driving
It's
because it's
pertinent.
it's late at night. Like, what's the weather? All those kinds of things.
That part's important, Travis, because we have to also talk about the technology that was there right back in 1983 with vehicles. Like we had identified some points where we believe, if that was what had happened to her, where we thought it was very feasible for her vehicle to have gone into a body of water, whether that was intentional or accidental. And cars nowadays, I mean, the technology is so different, right? The headlights and taillights on vehicles, they illuminate the road so much better. But we didn't know, right? Like we didn't have a 1980 Toyota Celica ready to drive so we could go drive it and just try to see how that was that night, right? We had to try to replicate it the best that we could, those conditions. And that's why the moon phase, like, I mean, we got made fun of by people, right? Like even people that we work with, be like, why would you guys look at moon phases? Right? It may sound crazy or whatever, but it's like, but truly, like one of the roads that we think, she might have went in on is it's a very dark road. It's somewhat secluded. There's trees all around it, and there's no street lights or anything like that. So we wanted to try to just put ourselves in that position to best replicate what she experienced that night.
Well, you didn't. I'm not making fun of you because you impressed me. I thought it was an impressive move. It's a small detail, and in the end, maybe it didn't make any difference, but it was something that you actually looked into. And things too, people don't realize. 42 years ago, you can talk about the cars, but were there guardrails on these roads? Were there trees in the way? You might look there now and see, oh, no way she could have drove through these trees. But were those trees there 42 years ago? You don't know.
That was some of the tips that we got. Was there was a body of water we were really interested in that. There's a fence there now, but we talked to multiple people that called in and said, hey, there was no fence here in the 90s. I know they built it. They're like, I know that fence went up in like 95 or 99. So we had looked at that body of water pretty extensively too, thinking it's close to the roadway. We went out and we had to figure out how deep is it? How long has it been there? It was man-made. Was it there? That was another thing, was just looking at, we had to get maps from the 80s and say, you drive down Randall Road in Elgin or wherever you are in Elgin, there might be a retention pond there now, but it's because they built a subdivision in 2000. So that body of water didn't exist in 1983, and vice versa. We have strip mines that were water in the 1980s that are now land where they built property. So we had to go back and kind of figure out, we're going to look at bodies of water. What bodies of water physically existed then that still exist now, and vice versa? And I think we had initially looked at what, Matt, like 5 or 6 different bodies that we thought were like pretty good spots. And when we got hooked up with Chaos Divers, when they showed up, they said, we have 37 spots we want to look at.
Yes.
And we said, okay, well, let's start going through that. So then it was just a lot of, bringing them on board was really, really helpful because they were looking at it even more in depth than we do.
And enlightening, because here you have something that this is what these guys do every day. So now, let's talk about Chaos Divers now. We'll hop right into that. Who I don't see anybody couldn't love this part. It was really, really great what these guys did, and that they do it on the arm, which is for free for people who are not familiar with that. All over the country. It's just some tremendous people that are doing this work. And they came up to help you. How did you hook up with them? What turned you on to them?
Yeah, so we had a retired police officer by the name of Mike Goff that had contacted us and said that this group is out there. He was one of their fans, and he knew through his time at the police department about Karen Shepers' case. So he was kind of in the loop, one way or another about how, we were going to maybe approach having to do some bodies of water searches. So he said, hey, maybe reach out to them and see, if they can be of any assistance at all. And we contacted them. I mean, they're very, very busy because there are so many cases, I mean, unfortunately, that are out there like this where lost loved ones are missing. So they do a lot of work with families. So we had a discovery call with them and filled them in, and they got back to us and said that they probably could come up right around the end of March to help us and start doing some searches. And a lot of that was also, we had people that asked questions throughout the investigation. Why didn't we do this sooner, right? Well, we didn't want to do it in the middle of winter when the river's iced over and the conditions are unsafe for divers or boats or anything like that. So March was an appropriate time to do it. And as we discussed, in our podcast, some amazing things happened at the end of March, with their expertise. And I cannot say enough about the true professionalism of chaos divers. They they put it back on us and say we're the professionals. I put it right back on them and say you guys are the true professionals here, because truly their expertise is what helped us to have some resolution to this case. Because if we would have just tried to have done what we did without their help, I think we wouldn't have had, the recovery that we did with Karen's vehicle. And they just provided so much expertise, and there were so many moving parts that had to be pulled together. And I think they've been doing this since roughly around COVID, so right around 2020, and this was their 20th or their 21st recovery of a lost loved one, which is just tremendous. And they're
fantastic.
They're self-funded, right? So I would direct listeners to go to their YouTube page. So this entire story about Karen Shepers is actually it was recorded live on the actual whole recovery that week. So they do a great video about this whole case. They're big on Facebook, so I would direct people to go to YouTube and Facebook to really just learn more about them. And you can actually donate to them as well.
Yes, please do. Listeners, please donate. If you got a little spare change in your pocket, give it to these people, because they're good people. I got two questions pertaining to them in particular before you tell the story, okay, of what transpired. In one, did they decide to look in the Fox River first, or was that your choice?
Yeah, so their expertise, they basically said our way of doing this, we think, is to bite off the biggest chunk first. So the river was the largest body of water that we were going to search,
Okay.
other than a big strip mine that we had. And they said the river is going to probably take us a full day, maybe 2 days.
Yeah.
And so we would rather get up there, do that first. We'll bite that chunk off. If we find nothing, then we can start going to these other sites, because these other sites, they could do 3 or 4, ponds or lakes in a single day. So they had suggested we do the river first. That's just kind of how it worked out. And we had questions about that too. Like, did you guys just know where the car was and go and find it? And the answer is no. We just
I
went
was
and looked.
curious if you guys were leaning this way, or if they were, and you just answered the question. They were, because they didn't have any suspicions. They thought this was the biggest piece. Let's get rid of it first.
Yeah. I think if you asked Matt and I personally, I felt the river, and then there was a lake. It was called Long Lake.
Mm-hmm.
Those were probably our two number one spots. I was leaning more towards having them do Long Lake first, because it was the one where we figured out there was no fence. We knew it was about 10 feet deep at one end. It was maybe 20 to 30 feet from the roadway. And the other side of the roadway is the river. So it was like the road runs kind of between this big lake and the river on each side, bodies of water.
Right.
So I think if they had left it up to me personally, I would have said, can we do Long Lake first and then do the river? And they said, we want to do the river first just because it logistically works out better.
Right.
But those were kind of our two big ones, in addition to these other 35 bodies of water.
Right. And now, correct me if I'm wrong, but you actually went out with them just for one day, right?
Yes.
And during that one day, they discovered, was it 3 or 4 cars?
3 cars the first day.
And so this poor fella, whose name escapes me, I'm sorry, the diver, had to go down. Now, this is March in Illinois. So that water is freezing cold, even if it's not frozen.
Yes.
And this guy had to go. I'm sorry?
I think it was 40 or 41 degrees when he was diving for us.
But he was in and out of that all day at 3 different sites, or 4 different sites, correct?
Correct.
And then go ahead and pick it up from there and tell us how it transpired.
So that was a Monday, so that was March 24th. Went out, and the area, which is the Slade Avenue boat launch, is where we went out on the boat. So Andrew and I were actually out with Jacob and Lindsay, and then the diver Mike McPherson, and then we had a member of the Kane County Coroner with us as well. We went out, and that area, which was just directly north of the boat launch, it's pretty deep there. It's like roughly like 7 to 10 feet in that area right there. And pretty quickly we had located 2 vehicles in that area. I mean, I'm probably not doing it justice, but I would say, maybe within several football field lengths of the boat launch is kind of where it kind of like goes into almost like a little bit of like a deep little rut right there.
Mm-hmm.
So almost like a little collection point. So early on, we found two vehicles. One had some potential that was similar to Karen's car. We pulled up a headlight out of that vehicle, and that headlight was eerily similar to Karen's vehicle. So we thought maybe we were onto something. And then we found a gas tank cover, and that was inconsistent with what we thought was on Karen's car. So we ruled that car out. We had several people ask us about those two vehicles, if those can be removed. Are they part of another, crime? And the way that it was explained to us by Chaos Divers is those cars are so in poor condition that it's basically like a fish habitat where you are grabbing metal and the metal is disintegrating in your hands. It's just so deteriorated. So moving forward with that, we pushed forward on the Fox River. We went all the way up into East Dundee. There's a bridge up that way, and they had removed a dam on the Fox River, so that whole area that would be north of I-90, which is a major tollway for us here in Illinois. It was very shallow. I mean, we're talking like 2 to 3 feet of water, like very hard to navigate on a boat. So the idea was, unless her car's in a little deep pocket that we'll never know about, like there's no car that's here. It's very hard to be able to know that. So it's kind of the end of the day. It's about 4:00 in the afternoon. So we're about wrapping up. We go back into that little area, and Jacob and Lindsay and Mike had thought maybe they had seen another vehicle in that original area where we found the other two cars. So we went over those little spots that we were at. And I mean, I still remember it clear as day. We were going over this one spot where Jacob thought he saw a car, and he went over it about 3 or 4 times. And then all of a sudden he went over it it just seemed like the perfect angle. And all of a sudden you see this car on his sonar appear, and it's a car that's upside down. You could see the wheels. He's like, that's a car right here. So they quickly identified the spot. And then we made the decision to send the diver Mike down to dive on it. And I remember looking at Andrew, and we're like, man, like he's been down there for like 6 or 7 minutes. And we're like, that's like the longest he was down. And I'm like, is he okay? Is something going on with him? And Jacob and Lindsay said, no, this is a good thing. He's onto something here. And he comes up with a license plate. And both of us have Karen's license plate memorized. It's XP8919. And he comes up, and he had the plate in his hand, and it was upside down and backwards from our vantage point. But we both saw what thought were 9s and an X and a P. And he hands the plate to me, and Andrew reads it immediately, and he's like, XP8919. He's like, I think that's it, And we radioed our command post. We had a bunch of people supporting us at our command post from the city and the fire department and our PD. And they're like, wait, what? We're like, we think we have her license plate here. And, sure enough, it was. It ended up being her license plate. And he told us that he took it off of a car, described it as a yellow vehicle, which we knew Karen's car was a yellow vehicle. And, the rest of that week just opened up from there. We were able to have a recovery the next day with it, without jumping too far ahead. But that was how those events went down on Monday.
Yeah, well, and the moral of the story right there was not to give up, because it was the end of the day. You were done for the day. And who was it? Was it the captain of the ship there, the skipper, the boss, whatever he's called, said, let's try this one more time, because you may have gone to another lake or another body of water altogether, but he said, let's try it one more time. And sure enough, you hit gold with it, I mean, literally yellow. You found a little golden car under the water.
Yeah. And the skeptical part of me came out where I asked Mike, I go, you did take the plate off of the car, right? You didn't just find it on the bottom of the river, right?
Sure.
And he kind of looked at me. He goes, yes, I took it off the car. I'm like, I'm sorry to be the guy to ask, but I just, that's where your mind goes sometimes, right? Because you're like, this can't be it, right? Like you're a little in shock, right? And like, just to share with everybody, like that moment, I mean, was legitimately emotional. Like I remember looking at Jacob, and he had tears in his eyes. We were emotional. Lindsay was emotional. Like it's like I describe it as the culmination of 6 months of work, and then you have something tangible in your hand that belongs to the person that you're looking for. You have an active piece of the of the puzzle in your hand that you can move forward with, right? So it's like, you have that and you're like, oh my gosh, like we have what we think is her car. Like we have the next step where we can then move forward with something actionable, and that was like pure power right there of like just everybody that came together on that case, all the support that people gave us, all of our listeners, everybody that, just was really behind us with that, our police department, our community, everybody that was involved. We're like, hey, like we got something here, right? And it's just, and that week was just something I'll never forget. Like just, if you, yeah, yeah, it was
Then
truly
everybody
awesome.
did again come together as far as different departments to retrieve that vehicle.
Yes,
Yeah.
sir.
And, and what did you find?
Andrew, I'll let you take it.
Sorry, I missed it. What was it?
No, well, you did retrieve the vehicle, and then what did you find?
We recovered Karen's remains. We also, because of Chaos Divers, and Matt said this before, we recovered some of her jewelry that we were able to get back to her mother.
Yes.
We would never have been able to do that without Chaos Divers. I think we would have inadvertently ripped the car apart or damaged the car or something like that. We spent all day, probably 6-7 hours on that Tuesday with Chaos Divers again on the river. And our diver's name was Mike McFerrin. He's a deputy sheriff down near Lake of the Ozarks in Missouri. He went up and down, up and down, up and down, and really assessed the car, helped the fire department here in town with their divers secure the car. We had a local tow company called Redmond's Towing come out with a crane because the car was about 160 feet from the bank of the river.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a really big process getting this car out. But they allowed us to locate the car, secure the car, remove the car in a way that allowed us to recover somewhere around 80% of Karen's remains, and also a number of different items of her clothing, personal effects, jewelry, things like that we were able to get back to the family, which was really fantastic.
Well, and that was one of the things that I really, really enjoyed about the podcast again too, is that you closed the case, which is miraculous to say the least. It was really, it was a miracle that you were able to find, this car after so many years in the bottom of a river, that there were remains left. But what I really did enjoy was after the case was over, how you did the episode with her family, and we got to hear her family speak, and that was quite touching. It brought a tear to my eye, to be honest. I thought it was really a beautiful thing, and yeah, it just must have made you guys, as awful a story as this is, there is a silver lining, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, Matt and I were lucky enough to be invited to the funeral. So we went to Karen's funeral. Just the way the timing worked out again, I mean, you call it fate, whatever you want to call it. They literally buried Karen on April 16th of 2025. So it was exactly 42 years after she disappeared. Mm-hmm. The family did that intentionally just because of the timing in which we found her, so they could celebrate her life, and that date could be a date for her funeral now. So she's buried. They know where she is. We've been out to the cemetery where she's buried and met with the family a couple times since the funeral. But being able to go full circle with them and kind of go back and talk to them again after interviewing them, 6 months before that was really nice. And we felt like they deserve to be heard. People deserve to hear them, and they deserve to be able to speak about their experience.
Yes. It's a tremendous job, guys. And I thank you. I thank you for them. I thank you for us in general, and that was the Karen Shepers case,
Yeah.
42 years. Wow. Good job. Tell us a little bit about what you got going on now, because you just started season 2.
Yeah, we can do season 2. I think Matt has to jump off, but Matt got promoted, so he left us. So we don't have him anymore.
Yeah, I got promoted. It was end of June to sergeant, and I went back to the streets. So I'm currently assigned to our midnight shift patrol as a midnight shift supervisor. My experience with this, and I'll just kind of share some final thoughts on my end because I gotta hop off the call, unfortunately. Is being able to now advocate for full-time cold case units around the country. I think that's an important takeaway that I have, and having that relationship with a family that has been missing a loved one for so long as well, is you really do need full-time units around the country, and you need dedicated people to work these cases, and you need individual space, and you need money. I mean, truly, we said that a little bit earlier, but when you're looking to do some of this, DNA testing on items that may have never been tested, or they were tested at one point, but now all the DNA standards have changed and it just has developed so much, is you need time, you need money, and you need resources, right? And that's where full-time units are so important. And we are just fortunate to be able to work for an agency that understands that, and they get that. They understand the bigger picture, get it, that you have to do it the right way. Like, if you're going to do it, like we said, don't mess around with it, do it the right way. So that's my advocacy now, is like when I talk to different agencies of like, hey, we're thinking about starting up a cold case unit, what do you guys think? And that's kind of the message that we share with them is, if you're going to do it, you can't do it on an ad hoc basis. You need to do it legitimately, and like, this is the model that you should be doing it with, right? And also, like, don't be afraid to work with agencies that aren't law enforcement, right? Like, that's our experience with Chaos Divers is, and really, like, the whole true crime podcast community. There's so many people that are out there that just want to help, and you have to vet people. You really do. You have to make sure that you know who you're working with. But there are groups out there that just want to help. They have the same goal as what we are. So what's the harm in working with some of these groups that aren't law enforcement? Because that adds the resources that you can have at your disposal to be able to try answers that you're looking for.
Yeah.
Well, there's since we're on this subject right here, our listeners just heard an ad during the break for the Cold Case Initiative. I don't know if you fellas are familiar with that at all. It's done by a lieutenant in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, I believe is his department. And he solved several cold cases while he was there. His name is Chris McMullen. And he was so touched by doing these cases and being able to give some sort of, the closure. Everybody likes that word closure, but there is some truth to it, some closure, some solace to the families after the fact, that he started up an organization that gives money to smaller departments all over the country who can't afford to do it, because quite often they can't afford to do the DNA testing or the rape kit testing or whatever testing it may be. They just don't have the funds. And so they'll find departments, again, all over the country, and say, if we think we can help you, we will, and they give money to it. So it's a good thing. It's a good thing to do. And while you guys are doing your networking, keep them in mind, the Cold Case Initiative.
There's lots of funding out there. People just have to go look for it,
Sure.
and you have to have an administration that's going to allow you, like Matt said, step one is you have to allocate 1 or 2 or 3 people to do this. And that costs money and man hours. Then you need to get additional money. Because like Chris and I are working our second season here, we are testing things, forensics and stuff like that. You're talking $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 to test 1 or 2 items from these cases.
It goes real quick.
Talking about, hey, we need to go interview this person, but they now live in the middle of Mississippi or somewhere in Arizona, and we need to physically go talk to them, or we need to go get DNA from a person that's in a different state. That costs money because we have to fly out there and do that. Yep. So you have to set aside the money for that, but you have to have the people first, and you have to have the mindset from your administration first that we're going to support that. For Matt and I, in the first iteration of this podcast, we were basically never told no. When we went to our administration and said, hey, we want to use our command vehicle, we want to have these briefings, we want to bring in this non-law enforcement group to do these sonar searches, we need to coordinate with the Kane County Coroner's Office, with the tow company, with all these other local agencies. It was like, yep, what do you need? What do you need? What do you need? And if your administration doesn't have that mindset, you're going to fail because you're going to butt heads against each other. We were very lucky in the fact that our chief created this unit. It was our chief's idea to do the podcast. Yes. And then once we selected a case and started doing it, when we said, hey, this is what we need, they supported us in that decision because they trusted us that we were asking for things that we actually needed. So it really is having that relationship.
Yeah, she did a good thing, and it was, lucky for you guys that it was her personal pet project, if you will,
Yeah.
And that worked out terrific. So how's the new case going now? You're 2 episodes in.
Yeah. I'll let you know, Matt.
You gonna take off, Matt? Thank you
sir.
so much, my friend. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Travis, for it. I appreciate it. See you, gentlemen.
Yes, sir.
Oh, now it's just the 3 of us.
There you go. So where were we? Yes. Tell us about
Um,
the new season now.
So season 2, Somebody Knows Something, is full steam ahead. We have 6 cases that we're featuring, going from 1971 to 1979. Of those 6 cases, 5 are homicides. 1 is a missing person. So we just covered episode 1 from 1971, Guadalupe Alanis' murder. Episode 2, which just launched today, in fact, which is the 1975 murder of Maynard Chester Holly. He was a yellow cab taxi dispatcher. The building is still in existence, just a few blocks away here from Elgin. So we physically went out there, inspected the site. We're gracious enough to be toured around by the current owner, Robert, of Jim's Towing. And we literally are in the building, in the office of where Maynard was shot and killed, brutally killed. And he said, yeah, when I bought the building in 1980, the bullet hole was still here in the window. Here's the window. And he would have been sitting right here. So you're physically on site, and it just everything comes at you. And, at least for me, being a newer detective to the unit, it's like, wow, it's just, you kind of like take a step and you're like, you can kind of envision what it.
Did you just say you're doing 6 cases this season?
Correct.
Yeah.
You're
So
not fooling around. Last time with Karen Shepers, you did 1 case. It was a trial run. You wanted to see how it worked. And now you're full speed ahead.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so we did more of an episodic, like serialized version for Karen's case.
Mm-hmm.
That took a lot of time. We learned a lot of things during the first season, that writing the episodes, planning the episodes, structuring the season was very time consuming. But we've had a lot of downloads of the first season because we had a success. And we've had a lot of local and regional, media attention because of that. So we wanted to capitalize on, this, people's attention span wanes very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
So we said we can't wait another year to put more information out there, because people are going to forget about us and move on. So we made the decision that our oldest case is 1971, and we said we have these 5 cases from the 70s. We also have Barbara Gluckert's disappearance from 76, which is related to that Thomas Erlacher guy we talked about earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just kind of do 1 episode per case. A lot of people in our community probably have never even heard about these cases or don't know about them at all.
Yes.
Because they're not these big, a college co-ed was murdered on campus and it's all over the media. These are your normal run-of-the-mill people that were murdered in the 70s. And our first guy was killed at a factory. He was shot and killed at a factory. As we went through that case, we realized that there was another murder at that factory 2 years earlier. The eyewitness to our homicide in 71 was also murdered a couple months later. So there was a lot of criminal activity around that facility and people there.
Mm-hmm.
So we talked a lot about that case in our first episode. We asked for information from the public about people that worked there, things like that. The episode that came out today was Maynard Holly's 47-year-old dispatcher, like Chris said. We released we released a witness statement that was never publicly released before, because we said, this case is 50 plus years old. Mm-hmm. We can probably put out a description that this passerby saw of this person in a vehicle, and maybe that helps us solve this case. Because if this case is sitting there for 50 plus years, nothing's happening with it. It's not going to be solved by just sitting there. And the longer we wait, our mindset, I think, was the longer we wait on these old cases, the more likely they're not going to be solved, because witnesses are dying, family members are dying. If we were to get closure for one of these cases, if the whole family's dead, that's great for us as a closure, but it doesn't help the family. Like, they deserved it to know, right? So we tell the families, like, we owe them the attempt to at least try to do something while there are still family members alive that will remember and appreciate that something happened with that case.
And I think too.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
And I think too, just to add, timing. It's like time is against you and time is also on your side at the same time, if that makes sense. But I think as more exposure happens with the podcast, we're not just reaching people in Elgin. We're not reaching people in Illinois. We're trying to reach as far as people can listen to podcasts and listen to the media. And it's that person that's in California, or that person's in New York, or person's in Florida that is so far removed from this case or this community that they hear something, they hear a key word that jogs their memory, and it all comes rushing back to them, and then they pick up the phone or they go on their computer and they dial us up and they say, "You'll never
Yeah.
guess what I just remembered," or "You'll never guess."
Well, you just mentioned the guy leaving the scene in a car,
Yeah,
and all
right.
you need is one phone call to say, "I remember this guy from the neighborhood who drove this blue Buick, whatever it is," you know, and bang, that's all you need.
Maybe someone remembers that our victim had an issue with this guy that drove a green 1961 or 62 Oldsmobile,
Yeah.
or the description of the guy. Maybe that jogs a memory too. Like,
Mhm.
it's something. It's something that's new that maybe we get information from.
Yeah.
And then we have our other cases, pending that are coming up. But we had a 16-year-old girl named Lori Bolger who was murdered in 1976. Barbara Gluckert disappeared in 1976. A gentleman named Casey Kyles was stabbed and murdered. I can see it out the window from our office here, in an alleyway when he was walking home, a 68-year-old black man. And then we have a young woman, Renee Tovar, who was 24, and she was stabbed to death and murdered in her apartment. So we're walking through each of those cases trying to do a couple things. One, we're interviewing friends and family and having them humanize who the person is. So we're talking about the victim.
Mhm.
We're not trying to give gory details about the case. If there's a suspect, we're not trying to glorify that suspect as like some anti-hero, Jeffrey Dahmer famous person.
Well, no, this is an active investigation. You're looking to find out who killed and or disappeared these people.
And then we're trying to, like you said, it's entertainment to some degree. People have to be able to listen to it. It has to be entertaining enough to listen to. But we feel like the hook is really the victim and the victim's family and how it impacted their family, and that people can relate to that. And then giving out new information, asking people to help us and say, hey, listen, we need help in these cases. We can't solve these cases on our own. I was not alive. Chris was not alive in 1975 or 1971. So if you have information, call us. Because I think you said earlier in the episode, Travis, like, you never know what little piece of information could be helpful. Someone may have been like, I went to high school with Lori Bolger, or I knew Renee Tovar when we worked at Lee Ward's in Elgin, and I remember this about her, or this about this thing that was never said to anybody, that you go, oh, well, that's interesting because.
People don't realize the tiniest things. I
Mhm.
mean, the color of a shirt, a shoe size, the silliest little things that can either turn you on to somebody or exonerate somebody. You know,
Mhm.
the littlest things say, "Oh, this is not our guy," and or "We got to take a look at this guy."
Yeah.
And it is, and people need to speak up, and quite often they don't, again out of fear, or they just don't because they didn't think of it. They just
Yeah.
didn't think of it. You know.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, good luck to you guys, man. You guys are doing some tremendous work. Good luck with the podcast. I think it's phenomenal. And again, let's give credit to your chief there, and Alali for coming up with this idea, and for you guys, taking it by the horns and running with it, man. You're doing great. You're doing a great job. You really are.
Yeah, we appreciate having us come on. And I will see you at CrimeCon when I come out there in
Yes,
two
sir. I
weeks.
will be there. I will be there. That's just a week away. We'll be together.
Yeah.
So, outstanding.
Thank you,
Anything else
Travis.
you'd like to add?
Excuse me. I just think that, again, KS Divers is fantastic.
Mhm.
If
Yeah.
people like listening to podcasts or like YouTube, versions of stuff, they will do, long sit downs about cases. They will also do like a, 10, 15-minute highlight of a case that they worked. Go check them out. They're really great people. It's Lindsay Busick, um, Jacob Grubbs, and Mike McFerrin was our diver. They have other divers they work with as well. There's other groups like them as well that do this, but I can only speak of my experience with Chaos Divers. They were fantastic, fantastic people. Um, just anecdotally, Karen's mom, Liz, who's 90 years old, wanted to meet them because they helped find her daughter.
Of course.
And it was, again, one of those things where, like, something happened with their RV. It wouldn't start. So they happened to still be in town. They were not even going to be here. So maybe it's just fate that they were still here. She asked to meet them. And I know Jacob was a little bit taken aback, and they almost didn't want to meet her because they felt like it was going to be so emotional for them meeting Karen's mom. That's the kind of people they are. Like, they're not doing this because they're trying to make millions of dollars. They're not doing this to be famous.
Well,
They do it.
and they are doing it for free all over the country. All over the country. They do it out of the goodness of their heart.
It is completely self-funded. So the way they make their money is by having it on Facebook and YouTube and Instagram, and then also donations that they get. So I know a lot of people here in Elgin donated to them after this case, and we've been really trying to push for people to take a look at their stuff. You know, they're not using the money and blowing it on stuff. They're buying a new generator so that their RV runs. They're buying safety equipment so they can do dives. They're, paying for gas. Gas is expensive. You're driving a boat with diesel fuel, for hours and hours on the river. So they're doing all these things and they're trying to help families. So we have told other law enforcement agencies we would recommend them to be used by law enforcement. Also, families can reach out to them privately and they will come out and help families. And they'll look, and if they find something, they'll call law enforcement. So just kind of pushing people back to them as much as we can. We've really tried to, broadcast out there that they exist and what they're doing, because they're doing really, really great work.
No, these are good people, So, and are you guys? Thanks for the good work. All right.
Thank you.
And thanks for joining us today. I think it's been a good conversation, and I look forward to talking to you in the future, as well as seeing you in a week or two over at CrimeCon.
Yep, I will see you there. Thank you, Travis. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Travis.
Yes, sir. Take care. All the best. All right, my friends, there you go. Hell of a story, wasn't it? I'd like to again give credit to Matt, Andrew, and Chris for doing all the work to find Karen Shepers. Okay? I'd like to give credit to Anna Lally, the chief of the Elgin Police Department, for coming up with this very, very clever idea. Again, I've never heard of this being done before, as far as having a podcast. And how about those chaos divers, man? That is phenomenal. Remember, they do it for free. Look them up on the YouTube. I know we said it a dozen times during the show. Look them up on the YouTube. Hit them with a subscribe. Follow them. Donate if you can. They are good people. And that's all I got for you this week. So, until next time, as always, please do the right thing. Hit that like button. Hit that subscribe button. And if you want more of my nonsense here on YouTube, or go to YouTube if you're a listener, and follow us on the For Boston's Media channel. Until next week, thanks and all the best. Hey, how you doing? Another nobody here, Travis Myers. This one's going out in particular to all my drinking friends out there, because I got a new favorite thing, and it's called Shanky's Whip, and it is magical. It's Irish whiskey mixed with a little caramel, a little cream, a little vanilla, and it's heavenly. What more can I say? I suggest you pick up a bottle. You can have it as a shot with a cold beer, like I like. On the rocks, it's great. Mix it with a little cola. I promise you, you're going to love this stuff. Next time you raise a glass, think of me, another nobody, Travis Myers. Hey, do the right thing. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any more of my nonsense. All the best, my friends.
Buy our books!
Listen up. This one's important. I'd like to try to encourage you, please, to give to the Stephen Siller Foundation, Tunnel to Towers, at T2T.org. That's letter T, number 2, letter T.org. Do good for those who've done good for you.